Hello, and welcome back to the Cuse Conversations podcast. I'm John Boccacino, Senior Internal Communications Specialist at Syracuse University.
I realized that if these women had the opportunity, just the opportunity, that's all they needed. And by the time I finished the race, I said, okay, I'm going to be a better athlete, get my credibility together here, prove myself, play by their rules, whatever they are, and change those rules. I wanted women to know how great you can feel when you're running. I mean, as long as I ran, I felt empowered. I felt like I could overcome anything. And it is. Running is naturally empowering. I mean, it's a super endorphin high. And so it's very, very beneficial for thinking and clarity. And I did a hell of a lot of thinking. When you're training for a marathon, you're out there for hours alone, and you can take on a problem and solve it.
Well, our guest on this episode of the Cuse Conversations podcast is Kathrine Switzer, the inspirational and trailblazing runner who made history as the first woman to officially run the Boston Marathon in 1967. But her story is so much more involved than just that date at the Boston Marathon. Kathrine has made a habit out of breaking barriers, and because of her courage in the face of adversity, millions of women have become empowered through the simple act of running. Kathrine has completed more than 40 marathons in her career, including winning the New York City Marathon in 1974. In 2015, along with 4 of her friends, Kathrine launched 261 Fearless, a global nonprofit that empowers women through running, helping thousands of women around the world discover their self-worth and their potential through customized education and running opportunities. The 261 is an homage to the bib number that Kathrine sported when she successfully ran the 1967 Boston Marathon as K.V. Switzer. Kathrine, it's an impressive resume you've got. I appreciate you making the time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John, for having me here. I mean, I'm an orange girl through and through, and it's wonderful to be back on campus and talking to you.
You can tell through and through that you bleed orange, and we'll go through the whole arc. I mean, your running career started here at Syracuse. But I know it can be difficult, but I do want to go back to that day, the day that has kind of defined and launched your brand and your reputation as being someone who supports and empowers women through running. What was that like with the Boston Marathon? The emotions, what was going through your mind as you and your cross-country coach, and I want to call him a coach because Arnie Briggs was a volunteer, but he really played a key role that we'll get to in your career here. What was going through your mind heading down to Boston?
Well, I've got to back up, John, honestly, because the story actually began out on the Drumlins golf course. I had gone in to see the track coach a couple of days before and asked if I could run on the men's cross-country team because at my previous college, I was recruited to run the mile for the men so that they could get points, and they had no problems with it. And when I came to Syracuse and I asked the coach, since there was no women's sports teams in those
Before
days,
Title IX, of course.
But not just running. I mean, there was no field hockey, no lacrosse, nothing. So I said, okay, I can run. So I asked the coach if I could run on the men's cross-country team. And he said, no, it's against NCAA rules, but you can come out and work out with the team if you'd like to. And I said, well, fine, coach, where do you go? And he said, Drumlins. And I said, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. And just before I closed the door, I heard him burst out laughing and say to his colleagues, I think I got rid of that one. I was so upset because I said, well, what am I going to do now? Am I really welcome or am I not welcome? And I said, no, I'm going to show up. He said, I would be welcome. I'm going to show up. And I went out there. I was very nervous. And you know what happened? All the guys on the team came running over to me and saying, wow, we have never had a girl before. This is great. Wow. And one guy in particular was Arnie Briggs, a volunteer coach. He was the university mailman. But he had been an ex-marathoner, and now he was injured and older. He's 50. He said, we've never had a girl here before, and I've been training with this team for 31 years. I'm now just a volunteer helping out with the team every afternoon, and then I do a little jogging if I can, and then I go back to the post office. And so he saw me out running with the guys, and I mean, of course, I couldn't keep up. I was really slow. And he started jogging with me. And he got over his injuries slowly, because I was slow on the grass. And he would regale me every day with a story about his career as a marathon runner. He ran the Boston Marathon 15 times. And it was the day he was the hero in his own life. It was a day when he was more than just a postman. It was a day when people cheered for him. He would finish in the top 10. He was a pretty good runner. The girls at Wellesley would run out and kiss him, and his name was in the newspaper. And so he inspired me so much to run long. We left the cross-country course, and we would out and run on the roads, and we ran longer and longer and longer. And then one day I said I wanted to run the Boston Marathon too, and he said, well, it's too bad, but a woman can't do it. And I said, what do you mean she can't do it? And then I said, I can do it. And he said, oh, no woman could do 26 miles. And I said, well, we're running 10 miles now, Ernie. And he said, 10 miles is not 26. But we argued. I told him a woman had run the Boston Marathon the year before without numbers. He didn't believe it. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you show me in practice that you can run Boston, I will take you. And if you can do that distance. And so one day we did. We ran 26. I said, that wasn't far enough. Let's run another 5. We ran 31, and he passed out at the end of the workout. And that's when he said, you can go to Boston. True to his word, he helped me sign up. He insisted I officially enter the race. He said, you're a card-carrying member of the Athletic Federation. You've got to sign up for the race. And so I signed up. Being a journalism student, I wanted to be a sports writer, so I was signing my name K.V. Switzer. So I put down, I wanted to be J.D. Salinger, too. So I put down K.V. Switzer on the entry form, not to defraud them, because that's how I'd been signing my name. Also, my dad had misspelled my name on my birth certificate, and everybody always misspelled Kathrine, so I just decided to be K.V. Switzer. Anyway, the entry was accepted. I didn't know that it was going to be an issue. There was nothing about gender on the entry form or in the rule book. So now I've laid the story open to people, okay? The background is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So showed up at Boston, ready to run. It was pouring, cold, freezing rain and snow. It was a real Syracuse day. But it was the worst day in the history of the Boston Marathon in terms of weather before and up to 2018 when they had a hurricane, the absolute worst day. Miserable conditions. And everybody was really getting hypothermia and everything else. But at any rate, I started the race again. The men were welcoming to me. And about a mile and a half into the race, the press truck went by, went kind of crazy, seeing a girl in the race. And I was so proud of myself, and Arnie was proud of me. And my boyfriend had come along from the track team, and he was a hammer thrower. But if a girl could run, he could run. And then came the officials' truck, and on the officials' truck was the race directors. And the race director completely lost his temper. He said, he jumped off the bus and ran after me and attacked me in the race and tried to rip off my bib numbers and started screaming at me, get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers, and calling me other names. Get out of my race. And Arnie was trying to bat him away, and it was really and this is right in front of the press truck, okay? And I was in tears. I was trying to get away from him. He was pulling me by the the sweatshirt, when my hammer-throwing boyfriend threw a crossbody block into him and sent him out of the race. Boom, on the side of the road. And then Coach Arnie said, run like hell. And down the street we went. Now, you know what, John? You're laughing.
Well,
see what I mean? It's a hilarious story.
Because of the adversity, but also, I mean, you had such a great team around you. And I'm laughing because it's such an antiquated notion to think that a woman can't. Back then, I mean, and give our audience a little perspective too, because the reason women didn't run marathons, there were a whole bunch of preconceived notions that were out there.
Right, but this official, had bought into all of that. But also he felt he was defending the rules in the race. But I said, there are no rules, and there was nothing about gender on the entry form.
You paid your $3.
I did.
You were eligible to run in that race.
Right. I think it's, $350 now or whatever. But at any rate, it was a very ugly situation, and I was so upset. And I mean, I thought I had really screwed up this important race, that somehow I had stepped in the middle of something that was really sacred and made it bad. And the press were all over me, and when are you going to quit? When are you going to quit? What are you trying to prove? And I turned to one of them and said, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just here to run. And I mean, God, I was only 20 years old, And they were so harassing that I just looked down, and then I said, you might as well go to the front, because I'm not dropping out of the race. And they left me, and I turned to Arnie and I said, I'm going to finish this race on my hands and my knees if I have to. because everybody's telling women they can't do it. And then they throw pull opportunities away from them so we can't prove otherwise. And, in those days, try to imagine this. 1967, you weren't even allowed to enter or apply to Harvard or any of the Ivy League schools. And, how are you going to get a law degree and compete with somebody who has a Harvard law degree? Then they say, we were giving women opportunities, but they can't do it anyway. Well, of course you can't do it if somebody's going to try to rip your number off, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I did. I went on. I finished the race. I forgave the official someplace around 21 miles when I didn't have any emotions left. I realized he was a product of his time. That was his problem. And that I was going to have to make some changes in his attitude and other attitudes. Again, the guys in the race were wonderful, very supportive. And then I was thinking, well, why aren't other women here? What's the problem? And I was kind of cynical about it. I said, women just not getting it. And then I realized, hey, come on. You had parents who encouraged you. You had a cross-country team who encouraged you. You had Arnie, and made all the difference. And suddenly I realized that if these women had the opportunity, just the opportunity, that's all they needed. And by the time I finished the race, I said, okay, I'm going to be a better athlete, get my credibility together here, prove myself, play by their rules, whatever they are, and change those rules.
The series of photos that the Boston Herald put out there, they're iconic. They were part of Time's 100 most memorable photos. How much did the visual component of what you went through help to really with the groundswell of changing minds and changing perspectives on this?
It was huge, John. It was everything. I think two things. One, if I had walked off the course, this would be, a ha-ha moment type of thing. And the other thing were the photographs. And as a journalism student, I learned so much from this experience because I realized that the media made all the difference. And one of the media problems I had is that a lot of the reporters reported that I didn't finish. So they didn't stick around to see that. It took me 4 hours and 20 minutes, but they reported that I hadn't finished. And that was wrong. And if you're going to be a good reporter, at the Newhouse School, they taught us, get the facts. Stick it out until you get the facts. And in fact, one of the reports came from the New York Times. So what did I do? Knowing that the New York Times was the be-all, end-all, everybody at Newhouse knew that the New York Times was it. I called them up. I said, hey, you made a mistake here. How about a little reprint, just correction? I just want you to know I finished the race. It's important for people to know that. And the reporter on the other end who had reported it started taking notes. And Sunday edition, I was all over the front page of the Sunday edition with a most fabulous story and wonderful interview. And that really helped change the tide as well because other journalist sources picked it up. But so it was a very good education for me that way. But it was a long haul after that, changing regulations. Again, here at Syracuse, I stayed here, took work after I graduated and worked on my master's degree at night. And during that time, organized Syracuse Track Club, Syracuse, which became the Syracuse Chargers. And I learned how to do race direction. I put on a race every Tuesday night. Learned how to get sponsorship, learned how to get not prize money, but prizes and sponsorships. And then learned how to work the regulations. Sat out my little time with the Athletic Federation, came back, took a leadership role, and decided I would make change from within, which you need to do. So that led to then creating the work to get to the Olympic Games, which we can talk about.
A lot of people, when faced with their darkest moment, you have the two choices. Are you going to fight or are you going to flight? And you chose to fight. And it's so applaudable what you did because eventually your persistence led to the women's marathon being admitted to the Summer Olympics in 1984 and the groundswell and popularity of running. What was your thought process? Why did you take that option and say, I'm not going to let what happened to me happen to other people who want to follow in my footsteps?
Because it was wrong. I was raised by parents who said, right from wrong. So go for what's right. And I knew it was going to be very time consuming and discouraging and a lot of catcalling. The hate mail I received was not nice, but I received really good mail. So I threw the hate mail away and kept the good mail. wasn't really trying to challenge them. I was just trying to correct the error, that the establishment had made. But more than that, I wanted women to know how great you can feel when you're running. I mean, as long as I ran, I felt empowered. I felt like I could overcome anything. And it is. I mean, running is naturally empowering. I mean, it's a super endorphin high. And so it's very, very beneficial for thinking and clarity. And I did a hell of a lot of thinking. When you're training for a marathon, you're out there for hours alone, and you can take on a problem and solve it. And one of the things I solved is what is going to take to get the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. So every night I would think of another part of that problem and then finding a solution. And the solution again and again came to opportunity. And what I did then, by the time I had gotten my master's degree, I just said, okay, I'm going to go to the Munich Olympics. I'm going to work as a journalist, freelance journalist, and I'm going to try to figure out how to make this happen, and I'm going to meet some political people there. Well, the Munich Olympics were a real trial by fire. I mean, it was a horrible situation, and I realized suddenly that this is very political at lots of different levels. When you're going to murder 11 Israeli athletes, there's a lot going on here, and that certainly takes precedence over getting the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. But it is still a series of prejudices and discriminations. So I was more determined than ever. And what I did is I said, okay, opportunity, create the opportunity. So I thought, hey, if I create a series of races around the world that are for women only, in the streets, make every woman welcome and treat her like a hero, make it feminine, make it non-competitive, competitive at the front if you want to be, but not, make every woman, regardless of age or ability, welcome. And so what's going to make that happen? Sponsorship. I'd learned that, getting trophies for Syracuse. And so I said, okay. So I wrote up a business proposal. So again, my journalism degree came in really handy, wrote a really gangbusters proposal, and decided to shop it around. And I decided to take it to Avon Cosmetics first, because everybody knew Avon. It's a women's company. It's cosmetics. It's safe for a woman, if you see what I mean. It's okay. It's a lipstick. And so I took it to their executives, thinking, they're never going to buy this thing, but here it is. I got a call the next day from the guy I gave it to, and he said, we'll probably never do anything with running. But honestly, this proposal is just incredible. And if you can think like this, we would love you to work for us. I said, he's just joshing me. Right? And I said, oh, great. Well, thanks. I'm glad you liked it. He said, would you be interested in working for us? And no, he said, what would it take to have you here to work for us? And so I knew he was joshing me, right? So I was making all of $13,000 a year that year. That was big pay, right? I said 30. And he said, that wouldn't be a problem. And that's when I learned you should ask for what you're worth. I had no idea that I could earn $30,000. And I thought, oh my God, am I up to the job? Suddenly self-doubt, and I said, you're up to the job. And I went in there, we launched that thing, short story now, right? Eventually, we had races in 27 countries for over 1 million women, 400 races. It was a huge global program. And I took it to places like Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, Japan. They'd never even had women's sports, much less, an open road race. The women came by their thousands.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so now I had the data and statistics to present to the International Olympic Committee. We had the participation, we had the sponsorship, we were on media all over the place, and we had performances. And we had the international representation that they essentially had to vote when those federations voted. And they voted in the women's marathon in 1981 for the 84 games by a vote to 9-1. So there we go.
And I love the fact that, and I mentioned earlier, you talked about opportunities for women, giving them the equal ground. Mm-hmm. Running for you, I see the smile light up and your eyes light up when you talk about running on the race. What is it about running for you that has been just so rewarding and so fulfilling?
It's given me everything. Everybody, they ask the question, what is the number one thing? I'll just say, listen, running has given me just about everything. It's given me my religion. It's given me my husband. It's given me my travel, my job, my perspective. But the biggest thing I think it's given me, my health, my wellness, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But the biggest single thing is it's given me. It's given me a perspective on myself and given me empowerment and belief in myself. And that's what everybody in the world is lacking at some time or the other. So, oh my God, can I do that? And I just go out for a long run and take a deep breath. Yeah, you can do this. So it is quite miraculous, and it's easy and it's cheap.
And anybody can do it anywhere.
Anybody can do it anywhere.
Well, I love, too, the fact, the humble origins of, because really you could say that your running career did start here at Syracuse when you were working with the cross-country team and Arnie and everything. And I want to bring this back to the Syracuse connection for a second. What drew you to Syracuse to study journalism, to study English, and then go on and get the public relations master's degree?
What drove me to come to Syracuse was the following. First of all, in high school, I was the first graduating class. So we were the first all the way through for 4 years. And when I first went into this high school, I wanted to work on a high school newspaper. And I wanted to write sports because the women weren't getting any coverage. The girls were not getting any coverage. And we actually had a field hockey team and a softball team. So I got some pump by writing my sports stories. And I loved the journalism and I loved the writing. So throughout high school, I carried on with the journalism. And then when I went to college, my parents lived in Virginia and they really wanted me to go to state-sponsored school, right? So there was only one co-ed school in the whole of Virginia at the time, which was Lynchburg College, which is now Lynchburg University. And I went there for 2 years. And one of my creative writing teachers was a Syracuse grad. Her name was Wilma Washburn, and she had a journalism degree. And so I took her journalism courses. We would talk about Syracuse. She would talk about her Syracuse days. I took a creative writing course and did well in that as well. And I realized it was writing that I really loved. And so I said, look, to earn a living as a writer, as a journalist, as a girl, especially one who wants to write sports, you better have the best damn passport in the world. And I looked and I said, there's Columbia, there's Missouri, there's Syracuse. Syracuse accepted, Syracuse I went to. And I never looked back, I had that passport, and that was really, really essential. And I thought I had a pretty good education. Fueled by the work I was doing, organizing running events and learning how to do the marketing, I said, really, my passion is also journalism, public relations, marketing, kind of that combination of making an event happen and making change and combining all those things. So I went back and my master's is in public relations.
Running gave you who you are. Syracuse gave you the skills to kind of fine-tune yourself and find what you want to do with your career. Is there a tangible lesson that you learned here at Syracuse that is with you every day, everywhere you go, that sticks with you?
Yeah, the weather. I got to tell you, it was the worst conditions I think ever in the history of Syracuse. This is the year I was there. I mean, we had 9 meters of snow that year. We didn't see bare ground from October until May. And I trained through that for the Boston Marathon. And it was tough. There were nights it was 30 degrees below zero. I'm not kidding you. And we were out there just in a sweatsuit, Arnie and I running in that stuff in pitch black and the blizzards and stuff like that. And I realized I was really tough. So when I got on the starting line of the Boston Marathon in 1967, everybody else was geting hypothermia. Hey, this is a spring day for us. But I say it metaphorically, meaning that, when all the conditions around you are bad and you can thrive and learn from them, there's no opportunity really that's a bad one. And that's what I learned. And I'm sorry, the university, of course.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, and the fact that you've come back, and I know we'll talk about speaking to students and the advice, but I want to ask you one question. I get the sense when you start something, you finish it. And that was exemplified by the Boston Marathon. You were not going to let the race official prevent you from finishing. You weren't going to let the adversity stop you. Where did you learn that lesson of you need to finish what you start and you need to be prepared for what you're going into?
From my father, absolutely, absolutely. He said, honey, when you start something, you better finish it. And that's his voice was echoing in my ears when the press was saying, when are you going to drop out? When are you going to drop out? And I felt like I really did want to go drop out. I just wanted to go hide. I felt so ashamed and embarrassed, and they were humiliating me. And my father said, you start something, honey, you finish it. And so, definitely did. And that was really, really important to me. Another thing is, it was my dad who started me running. Because I wanted to be a high school cheerleader, woo! woo. And my dad said, oh, honey, you don't want to do that. You know, life is to participate, not to spectate. And you know, you shouldn't cheer for other people. People should cheer for you. I said, well, Dad? And he said, you know, your school has something new. It's called a field hockey team. And if you ran a mile a day, you'd be the best player on the team. He was a very motivating guy. And I said, I can't run a mile. And he said, sure you can. You can go right now and you can run a mile. And I said, I can't. And he said, come on, I'll show you. We went outside, measured the yard, 7 laps. He said, okay, just do it. Just try it. And I took off. And he said, no. Go slow. It's not about fast. It's about finishing the job. I mean, I remember all these things. And so when I finished, I said, Dad, I did it. I did a mile. And he said, yeah, now you do it every day.
That lesson clearly stuck with you, though, too.
And they do. Yeah.
And I love hearing the beginnings of where people come from and what shape their careers that they take on. And I love what you've done with 261 Fearless. The fact that you've got more than 5,000 women, girls of all ages, of all backgrounds, all abilities coming together. You mentioned this earlier, but what do you think is the biggest impact that 261 Fearless has had in the ways of empowering and lifting up other women through running?
John, you know, it's an early question because we're really only 10 years old and we're in 13 countries already. This is a nonprofit, and nonprofits, foundations, etc., really only reach their fullness after, you know, a couple of decades. So we are on the right track, which is terrific. So the influence we've already have is we have proved that regardless of your age, your ability, or your background, or whatever, if you could get out and put one foot in front of the other, you're going to become empowered. If you want to lift a woman up, just show her how to run. But she needs a friend. And women, you know, we look at all the modern women out running. There are thousands and thousands of them, but there are so many women who are isolated or restricted by religious convention or social convention or cultural mores or the old myths that I grew up with, which is like, if you run, your uterus is going to fall out. You know, so, you know, you're kind of terrified. Do I really want to run or get big legs and turn into a man? Those are all the things they told us, right? Then those myths still exist. And so you say, okay, well, you know, how are you going to reach these women? Well, you need to do it at the grassroots level, and you need to take them by the hand and say, hey, look, this isn't about being competitive. It's just about come out and have a jog or a walk with us and go get coffee or something afterwards. And yet these women who are taking you by the hand are trained coaches. So we have them as really people who know how to do that and reach out to them. And we're going to work, and we are working, you know, village by village, city by city, country by country, and just going in at the grassroots level, and the word spreads. My dream, after getting the women's marathon and the Olympic Games, I remember I was doing the TV broadcast by that time, another Newhouse score, right? I came out of the stadium and said, okay, we did that. You know, we got the women's marathon and the Olympic Games at 90,000 people screaming and, you know, 2.2 billion viewers, unbelievable. That'll change the world, I said. It was only about a week later you hit that postpartum funk, you know? And I thought, oh, that's really great for women who can train and go to a race. How about those women who, you know, they're under a burqa in Afghanistan or North Africa, or they're isolated in their home with domestic abuse? How are we going to reach those women? And suddenly that old bib number 261 became a number meaning fearless in the face of adversity, and it absolutely went viral. People were telling me, it's changing my life, I'm taking courage from you. And what it really means is that they need a symbol to make something happen, and that's what inspired us to create the nonprofit 261 Fearless. Not a business, a nonprofit.
Absolutely, and 261 Fearless is real. And the fact that the bib number, is it even possible to comprehend? You didn't enter the Boston Marathon looking to make history, but out of that troubling moment, just how much good has come from that.
I know, but from the worst things can come the best things, and that's what I'm going to be telling the class today. I said, you know, if something is wrong, there's an opportunity to change it. You know, that we can then reverse that. You look at, what's the solution to this? Let's do the solution.
Well, the last question I have for you, Kathrine, and I'm so grateful for you making the time. You've had such a lovely story to share with our audience here. you're talking to students coming up here for fall classes. You obviously love running and you love Syracuse. If somebody asked you to define what does it mean to be an alumna of Syracuse University, what would you say?
I would say that it is a very powerful thing, and that it is I was going to say a sisterhood and a brotherhood. It is a very important friendship and network and a sense of unity of purpose. And certainly I think in Falk, which is a new school relatively at Syracuse, but growing wildly and powerfully into something that is educating students for a universal language. Sports is a universal language. You know, sports doesn't need Spanish, English, whatever. You're watching a soccer game, you know what's going on here. And running is a universal language. And so through this universal language, I think getting an education that enhances that understanding globally is going to only increase the luster of Syracuse University.
I'd be remiss. I have one more question I think you'll appreciate me asking you before we wrap up here. Tell our audience about the work you're hoping to achieve with the university, our library, and our archives.
Oh boy, I had a wonderful meeting this morning with them, and I have, I guess I'm a hoarder at a certain point, but I couldn't bear to give up any of the videos or film or writing or the brochures and all the work we had done leading to get the women's marathon, in particular, into the Olympic Games, and I kept it all. And my husband, very, very gratefully to me, went down into my basement and at least put them in boxes by year. But there is a ton of material, and it's now very valuable. And I'm hoping that the acquisition and my gift of all of that material to the Syracuse University Library will result in probably the biggest collection and best collection of women's running history, marathon history anyway, distance running, in the world. And it is a joy to think that it will be public accessible, which I think is everybody's ambition.
It's really a treasure trove of memories to go down and to share it with the future generations, because we need to keep telling these stories of overcoming adversity. And again, I can't thank you enough. Kathrine Switzer has been our guest here on the Cuse Conversations podcast, a revolutionary, trailblazing pioneer who is humble as can be, too. We've really enjoyed your stories. Thank you so much, Kathrine.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Go Orange.
Thanks for checking out the latest installment of the Cuse Conversations podcast. My name is John Boccacino, signing off for the Cuse Conversations podcast.